Good evening, my friends. Today we're diving into something that every single one of us needs to understand deep down in our hearts, how God's plan is unfolding in your life. You know, sometimes we walk through this world and think we're all on our own, don't we? We look around at the chaos, at the difficulties, at the circumstances that don't make sense, and we start to wonder, does God even see me? Is there a plan for my life? I'm here to tell you that there is, and it is unfolding in ways you may not even realize yet. But the question is, can you see it? When you're in the middle of a storm, it's easy to get lost in the winds and the waves. It's easy to feel like you're drifting, like there's no clear direction. In those moments, you might feel like you're on your own. But here's the truth. God has been in control of your life from the very beginning. And what's happening right now, even the painful moments, is part of his divine purpose. I've had my share of struggles. There was a time in my life when I felt lost, like I was just going through the motions. Everything I worked for seemed to fall apart. But looking back, I can see how God was using every challenge, every setback, every disappointment to shape me. Even in those moments when I didn't understand, he was at work. You see, that's the thing about God. He doesn't operate on our time, our expectations, or our understanding. His ways are higher. His thoughts are deeper. In life, we often try to control the narrative. We want to plan everything out, make it all fit neatly into our timeline. But God's sovereignty reminds us that he is the one who holds the blueprint. He's the one who knows the end from the beginning. Our job is to trust him, even when it doesn't make sense, even when the road ahead feels uncertain. But here's the thing, if we stop and look, we can see how God's hand is moving. How he's been there all along, orchestrating things behind the scenes. You know, one of the most powerful truths we can embrace is that our lives are not random. There are no accidents. There's a purpose in everything. We might not always see it right away, but trust me, God is at work. The Bible is full of stories of people who had to trust God's plan, even when it was hard to understand. Take Joseph, for instance. He was sold into slavery by his own brothers, thrown into prison for a crime he didn't commit, and spent years in difficult circumstances. But none of it was wasted. All those years, those moments of pain and confusion were part of God's greater plan. Joseph didn't know what was coming, but he trusted God. And in the end, God elevated him to a position of power where he could save his family and his nation. Joseph's story is a reminder that our circumstances do not define God's plan for us. No matter how dire things may seem, no matter how long the wait, God is working in ways we can't see, preparing us for what he has in store. And let me tell you, his plan is always better than ours. Always. But here's the catch. God's plan doesn't always unfold in ways that are easy for us to understand. There will be times when you feel like you're stuck, when you wonder if your dreams are slipping through your fingers. There will be moments when you feel forgotten, overlooked, or even abandoned. But that's where faith comes in. Faith is what helps us hold on when everything around us seems to fall apart. There's a powerful lesson in the waiting. Trusting that God is moving even when we can't see it is part of what strengthens us. The waiting isn't wasted, it's part of the process. Just like when a seed is planted in the ground, it has to wait and grow before it can bear fruit. And so it is with God's plan for us. We're being shaped, refined, and prepared for what lies ahead. But how do we know when we're on the right path? How do we recognize when God is leading us? It's often in the quiet moments, the still small voice. It's in the doors that open when you least expect it. In the people who come into your life at just the right time, in the unexpected moments of peace that flood your heart. God speaks to us in ways that go beyond the ordinary. Sometimes we just need to pause and pay attention to the signs he's giving us. I've seen it in my own life. There have been times when I didn't know which way to turn. But I felt a peace in my heart that led me in a direction I hadn't planned. In those moments, I've learned to trust that God's plan is unfolding, even when I can't see the whole picture. And you know what? He's faithful. He always provides, always directs, and always leads us where we need to go, even when it doesn't make sense. But here's the most important thing. You don't have to have everything figured out right now. You don't need to know every detail of the journey. What you need is to have faith, to trust that God's plan is bigger than anything you could imagine. When you walk by faith, you walk in confidence, knowing that He's already gone ahead of you, preparing the way. And I want to encourage you today, don't let fear or doubt keep you from stepping forward. God is with you. You are not alone. The trials you face today are not a sign that God has abandoned you. They are a part of the process. Every challenge you face is an opportunity for growth. It's refining you, making you stronger, preparing you for the greater things God has ahead. So the next time you find yourself in a tough place, remember this: God is still in control. His plan is still unfolding, and you are right where you need to be. Trust Him. Walk by faith. And know that the best is yet to come. I know we don't like waiting. We don't like uncertainty. We want answers now. In a world that thrives on instant gratification, waiting feels unnatural. We live in a culture that tells us we should have everything figured out and we should have it right now. But that's not how God operates, is it? God's timing is not the same as ours. The Bible tells us that with God, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. His ways are not our ways. His timing is perfect, even when it doesn't make sense to us. How many times have we rushed ahead wanting to force things to happen, only to find that God was working on something much bigger, much better than we could have imagined? I think about the story of Abraham and Sarah. God promised Abraham that he would be the father of many nations. Yet for years, he and Sarah waited. And I mean waited. They were well past childbearing age, and still God's promise seemed like a distant dream. There were moments of doubt, moments where it seemed like God had forgotten them. And yet God had a plan. It wasn't until they were well beyond their ability to have children that God made it clear this miracle would be all His. The wait was not only for the fulfillment of the promise, but for a demonstration of His power. Their faith and their waiting were part of the process. And when Isaac was born, it wasn't just the birth of a child, it was the fulfillment of God's promise, made in His perfect timing. Sometimes it's easy to lose heart during the waiting periods of life. When you're praying for something and it feels like the answer isn't coming, it's easy to wonder if God is even listening. You might question whether He sees your pain, whether He knows your needs, and whether He truly has a good plan for you. But let me assure you, God is never late. He's always right on time. It's in the waiting that we're refined. It's in the waiting that we're taught to trust. God's silence isn't a sign of His absence. It's often an invitation to dig deeper into faith. Just like when you plant a seed in the ground, you can't rush the process. You can't force the seed to grow faster. But with time, with patience, and with the right conditions, that seed will blossom. Your life is the same. Every moment of waiting is a moment where God is at work cultivating something beautiful in your heart. Think of Joseph once again. After he was betrayed by his brothers and sold into slavery, he found himself in a foreign land. Not only that, but he was falsely accused of a crime and thrown into prison. And for years, Joseph waited. But during those years, God was building his character. He was teaching him humility, patience, and faithfulness. The prison was not just a place of punishment, it was a place of preparation. Joseph had no idea how long it would take or when the breakthrough would come. But God's plan was unfolding step by step, even when Joseph couldn't see it. And eventually, God lifted him up from the prison to the palace, where he would be in a position to save not just his family, but an entire nation. Waiting is hard, but it's never wasted. There's a purpose in the waiting, even when you can't understand it at the time. And while you're waiting, God is doing something in you. He's working on your heart, refining your spirit, and strengthening your faith. You may not see the full picture right now, but you can trust that God is at work. When we go through difficult times, we often pray for God to change our circumstances. But sometimes God isn't just working to change our circumstances, He's working to change us. He's preparing us for what's ahead. And if we rush ahead, trying to make things happen in our own timing, we may miss out on the deeper work He wants to do in us. The key is to trust in His process, to trust in His timing. It's not always easy, but it's worth it. As much as we want to control the narrative of our lives, we have to remember that God is the author. And the author always knows the more is the best way to write the story. God is working things out for your good, even when you can't see it. The waiting seasons of life are not empty seasons. They are filled with purpose, filled with growth, and filled with the potential for breakthroughs that will shape your destiny. The key is not to give up during the waiting, but to trust that God is preparing you for something greater. When we learn to trust His timing, we learn to rest in His peace. We stop striving, stop worrying, and start trusting that He is in control. You see, when we wait with trust, we allow God to work in us, and that's when we begin to see His plan unfold in ways we could never have imagined. So in your waiting, don't lose heart. Trust the process. Trust that God's timing is perfect, and that every moment of waiting is one step closer to the fulfillment of His promises. Every day that passes brings you closer to what He has prepared for you. And though you may not understand it now, you can be sure that He is working things together for your good. And in the end, you will see that the wait was worth it. How do you recognize when God's plan is unfolding in your life? How do you know that what's happening right now is part of the divine direction He has laid out for you? It's not always obvious, is it? Life has a way of throwing distractions our way, and sometimes it feels like we're just making decisions and moving through life with little awareness of God's guiding hand. But if we take a step back and listen, we will begin to see the subtle ways in which God is directing us. First, it often comes in the form of small, seemingly insignificant moments, those quiet whispers in our hearts, those unexpected encounters, and those gentle nudges that can sometimes feel like a coincidence, but in fact, God's plan unfolding in real time. We don't always recognize them right away, but as we look back, we see how clearly God was working. I remember a time when I was at a crossroads in my life. I was facing a major decision, and I didn't know which direction to go. I prayed about it, asked for guidance, and waited. One day I met someone completely unexpectedly, someone who had been through a similar situation and offered me wisdom that shifted my perspective. It wasn't a grand revelation or a booming voice from heaven, but in that conversation, God spoke to me. He used that person as an instrument to direct my steps. That moment felt like a small thing at the time, but looking back, I realized that it was God's hand at work, showing me the next step. This is how God often works. He doesn't always give us the whole picture, He gives us pieces of it. But it's up to us to be attentive to the pieces, to be in tune with His voice. And when we align ourselves with God's will, He reveals more and more to us. God also speaks through His word. When you find yourself in a season of uncertainty or confusion, the Bible becomes a roadmap that helps you find your way. There have been countless times in my life when I opened the Bible in the middle of a struggle, and the passage I read spoke directly to what I was going through. It was as if God was speaking directly to me, offering encouragement, correction, or guidance. The more you immerse yourself in His word, the more you begin to recognize His voice in the scriptures. And when you face difficult decisions, that same word will guide you in ways that go beyond what you can understand. But recognizing God's plan isn't just about being aware of the small moments in the word, it's also about looking for His hand in the opportunities that present themselves. Sometimes God opens doors that you never could have imagined. You might be walking along thinking you know where you're headed, and suddenly a door opens that you didn't expect. It could be a new job opportunity, a relationship that forms unexpectedly, or a chance to serve in a way you never considered. These are the moments when we often question, is this God at work, or is this just coincidence? But I can tell you, when you are walking in step with God, when you are aligned with His will, these opportunities are not mere coincidences. They are divine appointments. They are the ways in which God is unfolding His plan step by step. And if we pay attention, we'll recognize them as such. I've seen this happen in my own life. There was a time when I was unsure of the next step in my ministry. I had a vision, a direction I thought I should be heading, but I wasn't sure if it was the right one. Then out of nowhere, an opportunity presented itself that I hadn't planned for. It was a door that opened, and at first I wasn't sure if I should walk through it. But in prayer, I felt a sense of peace, a knowing that this was God's plan unfolding. I walked through that door, and it led to some of the most rewarding and impactful years of my ministry. But here's the thing, recognizing God's plan isn't always easy. It's not always clear-cut. Sometimes you'll wonder if you're truly hearing His voice, or if you're just following your own desires. The key is to seek confirmation. Ask God to show you his will. The Bible tells us that if we lack wisdom, we can ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault. God wants you to know his plan, and if you seek him with an open heart, he will show you the way. There are also times when God's plan will be revealed through the counsel of others. God places people in our lives to help guide us and provide wisdom. That's why community is so important. When you're unsure, it's wise to seek advice from those who are walking in God's will, those who have trusted him and followed his path before you. Sometimes we can't see the way forward clearly on our own, and that's when God will use the wisdom of others to help guide us. But recognizing God's plan requires us to be open to his leading. It requires us to let go of our own plans and our own agendas. We must be willing to trust that his way is better, even when it doesn't make sense. We must be willing to take risks and step into the unknown, knowing that he will be there every step of the way. And even when it seems like things aren't going according to plan, we can trust that he is still in control. God's plan is unfolding all around us, even in ways we don't fully understand. But if we listen carefully, stay connected to his word, and walk in step with the opportunities he presents, we will begin to see it more clearly. We'll begin to recognize the signs of his hand in our lives and see how he's been at work all along, orchestrating our steps and preparing us for the future he has for us. And when that happens, we can walk with confidence, knowing that we are exactly where he wants us to be. God's plan doesn't always easy to understand. We want the road to be smooth, the path clear, and the destination obvious, but the reality is that God's ways are often far different than our own. He doesn't always show us the full picture at once. And at times he allows us to walk through seasons that don't seem to make sense. Those are the moments when we question, why is this happening? Why is everything falling apart? But I want to tell you something important. Your struggles, your challenges, your setbacks, none of them are wasted. They are not signs of God abandoning you. In fact, sometimes those very struggles are the means by which God is shaping you, preparing you for what lies ahead. It is often in the most difficult seasons that we experience the most growth, even if we don't recognize it at the time. We may not understand it now, but in the fullness of time, God's plan will become clear, and we will see that he was at work even in the hardest moments. Think about the life of Moses. He was born into a time of oppression for his people, the Israelites, and from the very beginning, his life was filled with challenges. He was put in a basket and sent down a river to avoid being killed by Pharaoh's decree. He was raised in Pharaoh's house, but knew he was different. He ran from his past. And for 40 years, he lived as a shepherd in the wilderness, far from the comforts of Egypt. It would have been easy for Moses to think that his life had no purpose, that his failures, his mistakes, and his years of exile were a waste. But when God called Moses at the burning bush, he was calling him to something far greater than Moses could have imagined. All those years, all those setbacks were preparing him to lead God's people out of Egypt. Moses didn't understand it in the moment. He didn't see how God was working in his life until much later. But as the story unfolded, it became clear that God was using every part of his journey to fulfill a divine purpose. And this is often the case for us. We look at the pain, the loss, the rejection, and we think it's a detour, but in God's plan, it's part of the preparation. We may not understand the reason for our struggles, but we can trust that God is using every one of them to shape us, to refine us, and to prepare us for what's next. Even when we can't see it, God is working behind the scenes. There are things happening in our lives that we don't fully comprehend, but that doesn't mean they are meaningless. In fact, the most challenging moments in our lives often lead to the most profound revelations of God's power, grace, and faithfulness. Think about how many times we hear stories of people who have gone through the darkest seasons of their lives and emerged stronger, more faithful, and more committed to the purpose God has for them. There's another thing we need to understand. God's plan often involves timing that doesn't match our own. We live in a culture where we want things to happen quickly. We want immediate results, instant gratification. But God operates on a different timeline. His plan unfolds slowly, often in ways that require us to wait and trust. And it's in the waiting that our faith is strengthened. It's in the waiting that we learn to rely on God's timing, not our own. The story of David is a powerful reminder of this truth. As a young boy, David was anointed to be king of Israel. He was chosen by God, and the prophet Samuel poured oil over his head and declared that he would be the next king. But after that moment, David didn't immediately step into a palace and wear a crown. No, he went back to the fields to tend sheep, and for years he lived as a fugitive, running from King Saul, who sought to kill him. The path to the throne was not a straight line. It was filled with danger, hardship, and waiting. But during those years, David's character was being formed. He was learning to trust God, to rely on him for strength, and to wait for God's perfect timing. It wasn't easy, and there were times when David doubted. But through it all, God was working. And when the time was right, when David's heart was prepared and the people were ready, he became king. This is why we can't rush God's plan. When we try to rush ahead or force things to happen in our own timing, we miss the lessons that God is trying to teach us. We miss the opportunities for growth and for preparation. If David had stepped into the throne at the moment of his anointing, he wouldn't have been the man God needed him to be. He needed those years in the wilderness to prepare him for the leadership role that lay ahead. And in the same way, there are seasons in our lives when God is preparing us, even when it feels like we're stuck or moving slowly. I want you to hear this: when you're in a season of waiting, when it feels like nothing is happening and you're frustrated, don't give up. Don't lose heart. God is at work in ways you can't see right now. He is preparing you just like he prepared David, just like he prepared Moses, and just like he has prepared countless others throughout history. His timing is perfect. His plan is always on schedule. Even if it feels like you're not making progress, trust that God is still moving in the background, orchestrating things in ways you can't comprehend. So when life doesn't make sense, when the road ahead seems unclear, remember that God is still in control. Even in the midst of your trials, he is at work. Even when you're facing setbacks, he is laying the groundwork for something greater. You might not see it right now, but the day will come when you look back and recognize that every challenge, every detour, and every season of waiting was part of his perfect plan for your life. Trust that his timing is always right. Trust that the delays, the detours, the struggles, none of them are accidents. They are all part of the story he's writing in your life, and he is faithful to complete the work he has started in you. Keep your eyes on him, stay faithful in the waiting, and know that his plan is unfolding. Even when you can't see there's a powerful truth that we must hold on to. No matter where you are right now or what you're facing, God's plan for your life is not over. It's still unfolding, and he is still at work, even when it feels like you're stuck or things aren't going the way you thought they would. We are all walking a journey with God, and sometimes the road we walk takes unexpected turns. But what's amazing is that God is sovereign over the entire process. He knows the end from the beginning, and he's not surprised by the bumps in the road or the detours you face. The reality is that life can sometimes feel uncertain. There are moments when we feel lost or unsure of where we're headed, but this is where we must trust in the faithfulness of God. His plan for your life hasn't ended just because you're in a season of waiting or struggle. God is constantly at work, even in the quiet, even in the dark moments. His plan is unfolding, and while it may not always look like what you expected, it's still exactly what you need. We often think that we should have it all figured out by now. We set timelines for ourselves, and when things don't happen according to our plans, we become discouraged. But God's plan doesn't operate on the same timetable. It's not a linear progression, it's a dynamic, ever-unfolding process. In fact, the moments where we feel the most uncertain are often the moments when God is about to reveal something new to us. Those moments are not interruptions, but divine setups, moments that may seem like delays, but are in fact just God's way of positioning us for what's next. Think about the story of Esther. She was an orphan living in exile far from her homeland. She was not someone who would have been noticed by the world, but God had a plan for her life. He placed her in the right position at the right time, not by accident, but by divine orchestration. And when the moment came for her to act, she was ready. But notice God didn't reveal the entire plan to her all at once. She didn't know that she would be the one to save her people from destruction. She couldn't see how her small acts of obedience would fit into God's larger plan. Yet every step of her life, every decision she made led her to that pivotal moment where she was able to be used by God in an extraordinary way. Esther's story reminds us that God's plan is often unfolding quietly behind the scenes. She had no idea the significance of the moment when she was called into the king's palace or when she was given the chance to speak to the king. But each step along the way was part of God's grand design. And that's the same for us. The decisions you make today, the small acts of faith, the moments when you think nothing is happening, these are the very things that God is using to shape your destiny. One thing we need to keep in mind is that God is rarely in a rush. His plan takes time, and sometimes we need time to grow into the people He wants us to be before we can step into what He's prepared for us. We may feel the pressure of life's demands, but God uses every experience to shape us, to refine our character, and to prepare us for the destiny He has in store. The waiting seasons, the times when it seems like nothing is happening, are not wasted. They are the moments when God is molding you, teaching you patience, and growing your trust in Him. Take a moment to think about Joseph once more. From the time he was sold into slavery by his brothers to the time he became second in command in Egypt, many years passed. Years of hardship, rejection, and waiting. Joseph didn't understand why he was going through what he was going through, but he kept trusting God. He kept being faithful even when everything around him seemed to fall apart. He didn't know that every single step of his journey was leading him to the place where he could save not just his family, but an entire nation. Joseph's story is a powerful reminder that God's plan may take time, but it's never without purpose. In our lives, God's timing may feel slow, but it's always perfect. We are often impatient, wanting things now, wanting answers right away. But God knows that we need the right conditions, the right experiences, and the right heart before He can bring us to the next level. Just like a seed that takes time to grow into a tree, God's plans for us need time to fully take root in our lives. And during that time, we are learning to trust Him. We are learning patience. We are learning to rely on His strength instead of our own. We are becoming the people He has created us to be. The key is to hold on to the fact that God is still in control. No matter how much time passes or how much uncertainty you face, God's plan is always moving forward. He is always working, even when we can't see it. The waiting periods are not periods of inactivity. They are times of preparation. They are times when God is working behind the scenes to line everything up perfectly for the next phase of your life. Trust in His process. Trust that He is with you every step of the way. You may not know how things are going to turn out. You may not understand why things are happening the way they are. But you can trust that God's plan for your life is unfolding, and He is with you through every season. He sees the end from the beginning. He knows exactly where He's taking you, even when it feels like you're walking in the dark. So take heart. Don't give up in the waiting. Don't get discouraged when things don't go according to your timeline. Remember that God's plan is unfolding even when you can't see it. He is working in the background, and when the time is right, you will see the beauty of His plan. Every moment, every decision, every step you take is part of His perfect timing. Trust in Him because His plan for you is far greater than anything you could ever imagine.